Hello, bit closer. Welcome, my next guest. Who are you and what brings you to JCON?
Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Marcus Hellberg, and I am here with Vaughn. And we have a booth here. I have two talks, and just looking forward. It's been a great event in the past, so I'm happy to be here.
Two talks, two different topics.
Yeah, that's right. So tomorrow morning, I'm speaking about full stack web app development, 100% in Java. So it's going to be a talk just introducing new people to Vaadin Flow, to just the idea of why you might want to build an app with a full stack framework in general, like what's the philosophy behind it. And then we're going to spend most of the time just live coding, because having done this a lot, like I feel like the best language to explain a framework to a developer is code.
Show it.
Show it. Don't tell me about
Yeah.
it. Don't do an interpretive dance or mime or anything else. It's show the code. That's what's going to explain it to people the best.
And the other talk is
So the other talk is a talk that I've actually given at, I think, like 10 user groups in the past month and a half. And it's a really fun talk where we learn about building AI powered applications. And again, it's got a little bit of theory just to kind of get everyone on the same page. It's AI is very new, and it's like I've noticed that especially like Java developers, people who have actual day jobs and don't have time to be on the internet and just spend all their time learning about new things. They're not like everyone's not on the same level, so we spend a little bit of time just going through the basics of like how does everything fit together, and then again we spend most of the time just building an app from more or less from scratch, just step by step adding more functionality. So we build like a airplane or like a airline reservation system chatbot where we can actually like interact with our database. We can change bookings and cancel bookings and get information, and it's all grounded in some actual facts based on documents that we ingest and things like that. So it's a like a realistic business app type of use case for AI.
but you have a bit of history in this topic. The very first blog I saw about searching in documentation with the chat-based system was a blog you wrote.
Okay.
You were doing this with the Vaadin documentation.
Yeah.
And I repeated your process with the Azul documentation.
Yeah.
So it was two steps at that time.
Mhm.
You first had to create a vector database,
Yeah.
and then use it. Now with LangChain4j, for instance, it becomes a lot easier. I've
Yeah.
done the same thing now with the JavaFX application.
Yep.
You've done this with Vaadin. Are you
Yes.
also using LangChain4j or?
Yeah, for a lot of my projects, I'm using LangChain4j. I actually have a project where I've essentially the app that we're building in my talk on Thursday, where I have that same app implemented with LangChain4j, with Spring AI, and Semantic Kernel, just so you can kind of compare the three. And out of these, right now, I prefer using LangChain4j. It's just kind of perhaps the most evolved of them, but it started earlier than the other two, and it's makes it super convenient to build AI powered apps in Java. They've done a really good job, I think. So I actually last week I created this little app starter where all you need to do is just change an application properties, one property to point in to a folder where you have documentation. It's using Apache Tika for parsing docs. So it can literally be anything that you have in that database. It just goes through it, creates vector embeddings by default into an in-memory database, and then you just starts a Vaadin UI, and you can start chatting with that documentation. So the intent there is to make it like this whole AI thing feel a little bit less intimidating and difficult to get started with. So you can maybe somebody who's interested in trying this out can take this app, they can point it to some internal documentation, whatever it might be, some PDF about their product, and then go and show to their boss like, hey, look what I just built. And they're going to be like, wow, this is just what we needed. You can now spend a week exploring this topic further.
But was it you who shared, if I remember correctly, 16 lines of code for a Vaadin chat application?
Yeah.
That was the minimal code you needed?
Yeah, and that included the Spring Boot application as well. So
which is amazing. That's what I find amazing about the Java community. If you find the right library, and it's probably available somewhere,
yeah,
you can write very powerful stuff with only a few lines of code, because the library is taking care of all the rest.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely true. And I remember when I built the application that I wrote that blog post about that you mentioned, like this was over a year ago, when none of these libraries existed, and it was really difficult to build it because I was stuck as a developer working on a very low level of abstraction where I'm counting tokens and trying to make sure that I don't exceed the very small context windows that we had back then, and like trying to figure out how do I expel old messages and what do I do and this and that, and it was like several hundred lines of just boilerplate code that was basically just a recipe for index out of bounds exceptions and stuff that I don't really want to deal with because it's not helping me build the actual application that I want to do. So these days it's like
It's just in the libraries.
Yeah, it's all hidden away. So now I'm actually working on the level of abstraction where I want to be, where I'm focused on the actual task I have at hand, and like I don't have to deal with all the boilerplate underneath, and it's really nice.
If we go back to Vaden,
Yeah,
I've used it in one of my previous jobs as the UI tool for a business internal interface. Is that the kind of use cases that Vaden wants to cover?
Yeah, so I think we even say it on our front page that we're kind of we don't think that business apps should suck. We think they should be great, and that's unfortunately not the case in many cases where business apps tend to be very kind of complex by their design. There's a lot of data and a lot of rules and forms and stuff, and at the same time they're not a product that brings in revenue, so they tend to be built with a fairly
minimal
tight budget.
Yes, yeah.
And they need to be maintained for a long period of time and all of this. So there's a lot going against them, but at the same time there are people in businesses who are sitting in a cubicle or at home working on these apps like 8 hours a day and not having a great time, and we really want to make sure that we make that experience as good as it can be. So that's what we're focusing on. Of course you can build non-business applications with Vaadin, but specifically you can maybe tell from some of the components we have in the library where they're quite more advanced than you see in some like Bootstrap type library where we have data grids and charts and these kind of higher level components that you can use to build apps quite quickly out of them.
And mainly they can be fully in Java.
They can be fully in Java, exactly. Yeah.
Which is, again, the library solving a problem. Vaadin takes care of binding what the user sees with the backends and saving things to the database, for instance, and updating.
And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Like you just instantiate a Java object, but what you get out of the box is quite a lot. So for instance, you know that the EU and the US and others are rolling out quite strict accessibility requirements, for instance, and we spend a lot of time making sure that all these components that you just get when you type new grid actually are really usable for people with a screen reader, for instance. And that is something, again, like this is similar to me writing all that boilerplate code counting tokens. Like if you start with just a bunch of divs and try to build a data grid that's both performant and accessible and everything, you can spend a lot of that, like a lot of the budget that you had intended to spend on building your actual application, you're now spending on building components. And we don't want people to have to spend time on that part because it's not anything that's specific to their business. It's something that we can provide that they can build on top of.
And it's very powerful because I was at Devox in Antwerp some time ago doing a talk with a Raspberry Pi, and I had all the people in the room connected to a Vaadin application, and I could just touch something on the Raspberry Pi and it got all got an update at the same time. And my Raspberry Pi was using no memory at all. So it's really powerful. I can use it on a very small Raspberry Pi. That means if you run it in a business on a big server, you can serve a lot of people with that single thing.
Oh yeah. So my coworker Matti did like a little myth busting blog post on this, and like there's always this persistent myth that if you have some kind of server state, no matter how small it is, it immediately means that you can't handle any kind of scale, and essentially just by doing some tests and some math, like a quite modestly sized Amazon node can handle just like tens and tens of thousands of concurrent users with no sweat at all. So it's for the types of applications we're focusing on, where maybe you have a few tens of thousands of users. That's not a problem.
Is that the demo where you have the electricity system that's visualized?
No,
or
that's actually another coworker of mine, Vesa, who did that for his own use initially. A lot of course, hobby projects start from your own needs. So this was
you're fixing a problem.
like a year and a half ago with the whole energy crisis. Starting up, prices went high, and he wanted to have a way of monitoring that, and that kind of then evolved to a thing where you can download in Finland your energy usage data in a format, and then you can upload it there, and it actually tells you, like, if you had this type of contract, you would have saved or paid this much more. And anyway, so he built that, and of course, because this was such a hot topic at the moment and still is, that has ended up having a lot of users. I think like 10,000 per day roughly, and he was running that on a Hetzner server that was like €5 a month, and like no issues at all.
So Java is powerful. We already knew that, but
Yeah.
you proved that even with the user interface and web
and
system.
and of course then we have things like Graal VM that Oracle's been building, and I have the documentation app that I built. I just because I wanted to see like how low can we go, I compiled that to just a Graal VM native and put it on fly.io, and it's been running for a year using 100 megs of RAM. It's like, it's mind-boggling what we can do.
Indeed, and that's what's thanks to all the evolutions in Java and all the technology around it. What we're seeing here at the conference and the several talks.
No, I think it's like I've been in the Java space for a long time, and I don't remember, like, it's been many years since things have been this exciting in the Java space, where you have all this new stuff happening all the time, and it's super fun.
And some amazing libraries like Vaden.
And some amazing podcasts like Foojay.
Thank you. Very nice message to conclude.
Yes.
Thank you. Have fun.